hold that argument. So eventually what happened was something called the Joint Congressional Inquiry. The Joint Congressional Inquiry was limited in scope thanks to Bush and Cheney. The Pentbom investigation, which is PENTTBOM, was the FBI investigation. That also had a lot of problems with it. The FBI didn't answer a lot of the family's questions. There were FBI agents who were working on the 9/11 case who were taken off of the investigation to be put on the anthrax investigation. During an investigation, you need continuity in order to get a thorough investigation, and that did not happen. So as a result, the family members fought for an independent so-called 9/11 commission. I believe it took Bush 441 days to enact the 9/11 commission itself after the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 commission report started on the foundation of the Joint Congressional Inquiry. The Joint Congressional Inquiry was limited in scope, as I said. It also had 28 redacted pages that were never released. Kirsten Bratweiser, one of the Jersey girls, the women who fought for the creation of the 9/11 Commission, recently met with Obama in February of 2009 and asked him to release or declassify those 28 redacted pages. And he said he would look into it, and she's never heard from him. So the 9/11 Commission was then started. The things that really stood out to me, if you remember, after the 9/11 attacks, we were told numerous times that nobody in our government could ever possibly conceive of what happened, that nobody could imagine what happened, that they had absolutely no warnings whatsoever. And I think sometime around March or May of 2002, it was leaked, the August 6th PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, which was called Bin Laden Determined to Strike in the U.S. And it talked about 70 FBI field investigations currently taking place within the United States, Al-Qaeda-related cases. People were taking pictures of federal buildings in New York City. They were talking about attacks or hijackings or other type of attacks in this August 6th PDB. So when I found out that there was some knowledge that this was going to take place, I got angry. I got angry because we were being lied to, and from that point, I was off to the races. And, you know, almost 8 years later, here I am today, still fighting for the 9/11 truth cause. Now, how many people here have this conception that 9/11 truth activists are crazy? Anybody? Polly back there, George over there. Guess what? Cindy was talking about how during marches, the media likes to focus on those crazy people like Polly and portray them as the whole. That's what the mainstream media in America has been doing since the 9/11 attacks. If you remember, George W. Bush said, "Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty." And that is essentially the formula that the media has been using, except the media has been calling everything conspiracy theories. You ask a question, you're called a conspiracy theorist. So if you think a 9/11 truth activist is crazy, and don't get me wrong, there are fringe elements in the 9/11 truth movement who push ridiculous information, who I don't know what their purpose is, but those are the people the media focuses on in order to portray us all as crazies. Another thing the media likes to do, last year at the Holocaust Museum, there was a murderer. Somebody went in there and shot up a couple of people, and somebody by the name of St. John's was murdered. Glenn Beck that day said, "I hear this guy is a hero of the 9/11 truth movement." So, and recently with the Pentagon shooter, they quickly tried to paint him as a 9/11 truth activist. And we had the Treason in America conference 2 weeks ago. ABC News came there with the express purpose of trying to paint us all as murdering psychos. Now, I can tell you I am not a murdering psycho, okay? I'm not crazy, well, a little bit crazy, but not so much crazy. So if you do have that perception of a 9/11 truth activist, it's because you've been watching too much television. Now, the real 9/11 truth movement started within days and months of the 9/11 attacks. John Albanese, who spoke at the Treason in America conference, spoke about individuals in New York City who were psychologically traumatized from the 9/11 attacks, and they needed to meet with other like-minded, psychologically traumatized people, and they started to meet in churches all around New York City. And like human nature would dictate that you are eventually going to start to ask questions about what happened that day. And that was essentially the birth of the 9/11 Truth Movement, along with what the family members were doing. Does anybody here know who the Jersey Girls are? The Jersey Girls are 4 widows who lost their husbands on 9/11. Lori Van Auken, who lost her husband Kenneth Van Auken, Patty Casaza, who lost her husband John Casaza, Kirsten Brotweiser, who lost her husband Ronald Brotweiser, and Mindy Kleinberg, who lost her husband Alan Kleinberg. They essentially forced Washington, D.C. to create a so-called independent 9/11 commission. Now, part of 9/11 Truth has always been anti-war. You know, these wars are taking place in what's called the post-9/11 world. The post-9/11 world is a world where we lose our civil liberties, where we fight preemptive wars, where executive power is multiplied by 1,000 with no accountability whatsoever, where we have wiretapping, where we have torture. This is the post-9/11 world. And if the event that created the post-9/11 world was not what we were led to believe, then we need to know about that, and we need to know about that now. You know, there were 2,973 people that were brutally murdered on that day. Their families deserve to know what happened. America deserves to know what happened that day. So what I'm going to do, I think, here it is. I wrote a couple of notes down. I believe that for people to start calling for a real new criminal investigation, you must first be shown that the investigation we got was an absolute farce. Okay? So I'm going to start reading off a couple of notes about the 9/11 Commission. The 9/11 Commission was originally funded with $3 million. It wasn't until the family members fought for more money that they eventually got $11 million and then $15 million. The 9/11 Commission was limited in time. You know, this is a murder investigation into the deaths of 2,973 people. You shouldn't have a limited amount of time to perform this investigation. The 9/11 Commission, the family members fought for the power, for the 9/11 Commission to have the power of subpoena. The 9/11 Commission only used that 2 times. What they instead used what were called document requests, which could be and were ignored. During the 9/11 Commission, there were individuals who would go testify before the 9/11 Commission, but they didn't go by themselves. They went with what were called government minders. A government minder is somebody who intimidates a witness to make sure that they don't necessarily say everything that they should be saying. Alberto Gonzales, does everybody remember Alberto Gonzales? He stonewalled the 9/11 Commission's access to White House documentation. You know, the 9/11 Commission was mandated to give a full and complete accounting of the 9/11 attacks. And the White House, according to the 9/11 family members, was the biggest adversary. Okay? Did you know that a massive portion of the 9/11 report was based on the tortured testimony of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed? Now, how reliable is tortured testimony? Can anybody tell me? Not reliable at all, is it? There's even a disclaimer in the 9/11 report that talks about how some of this testimony might not be reliable. Now, something I want to talk to you about, the individual that was in charge of the 9/11 Commission, it was not Thomas Keane, it was not Lee Hamilton. By the way, Lee Hamilton should have never been anywhere near the 9/11 Commission.